In the searing heat of July 2025, just outside the quiet farming town of Bobo Dioulasso in Burkina Faso, the ground began to tremble, but not from bombs, not from bulldozers, from tractors, red gleaming new, dozens of them, rumbling through the fields not as charity nor as foreign aid, but as part of something far more radical. Some challenged the very logic of global trade itself. No European middlemen, no IMF conditions, no quiet colonization buried in fine print, just cotton soil dignity and a handshake. The world looks away. Why do we still expect leadership in the global south to speak with borrowed voices, beg for loans, or follow the blazing sun, where a farmer named Madu stood in disbelief as young men from the Ministry of Agriculture handed him a folder written not in English or French, but in Moray, his own language? What you're about to hear is not just about economics. It's about sovereignty, the right of a people to define their future in their own terms with their own tools. It's the story of how President Ibrahim Traoré, a leader dismissed by many as unpredictable, quietly rewrote a century of dependency with the stroke of a pen and the roar of a tractor. If you've ever wondered whether true change still happens in this world, not in headlines but in harvests, stay with us. Because what unfolded in the cotton fields of Burkina Faso may shape not just Africa's future, but all of ours. And if you believe that trade should honor the hands that grow the harvest, not just the hands that sign the checks, then this story is yours too. A deal without brokers. A trade without chains. It happened quietly. No flashing cameras, no summit stage, no Western handshakes for the press, just two flags, one red-green-gold, the other green-red, and a field of cotton. In July 2025, Burkina Faso and Bangladesh signed a historic bilateral agreement that bypassed the traditional networks of global trade. For the first time, African-grown cotton would travel directly to the textile factories of South Asia without being routed through European traders, without facing the exploitative pricing structures of global commodity markets, and without being treated as charity. The deal was simple in form, yet revolutionary in function. Bangladesh, home to one of the world's largest garment industries, agreed to purchase high-quality Burkina cotton, directly creating a reliable long-term demand. In return, Burkina Faso secured not only fairer pricing for its farmers, but access to something even more valuable: technical knowledge, agricultural tools, and training opportunities once considered out of reach. Over the following 12 months, the effects were undeniable. More than 400 tractors, 68,000 tons of fertilizer, and solar-powered irrigation systems were delivered directly to cotton-producing regions. Young agronomists from both countries began collaborating on solutions to age-old problems: how to fight pests without poisoning the soil, how to transport harvested cotton faster, how to store it better. But this agreement wasn't only about cotton. It opened pathways that few could have imagined just a decade ago: vocational training exchanges, educational scholarships, post-harvest logistics partnerships, disaster relief coordination, even joint peacekeeping training between the two nations' military academies. Burkina Faso's President Ibrahim Traoré was clear in his vision: we are no longer exporting raw hope. We are exporting value. And we will never again sell our dignity for a lower tariff. For decades, countries like Burkina Faso had been treated as sources of raw material and little else. Their resources extracted, their labor undervalued, their economies tethered to debt cycles and donor conditions. But with one deal, that narrative began to shift. And while diplomats in Brussels dismissed it as a regional agreement, and analysts in Washington called it symbolic, something deeper was already taking root. In Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso, the streets remained calm. But in the countryside, in the cooperatives, in the villages, a quiet because if cotton could be traded with dignity, what else could follow, from one field to the world stage? The morning sky over Kumbi was unusually still. Crumbling clouds hung above a horizon of dry soil. Madu once washed away both roads, and hope. Villagers used to say, when the roads vanish, so do the dreams. In the past, a pregnant woman in distress could not reach the clinic. A farmer's onions would rot before reaching the market. And ambulances, they often got stuck or never arrived at all. But by mid-2025, that story began to shift labor, but by local engineers trained through a new national infrastructure program funded entirely by domestic revenue. Designed and repaired by Burkina hands, fueled by the same sun that once scorched their crops. Equipment that built her country's future. I used to earn nothing and send everything home, she said. Now, I fixed the symbol of wealth. Something unusual happened in the spring of 2025. A $12 million tomato processing my fight. Its dignity, my mission. Oath recited nightly around campfires. One young man, Isaka, once dreamed of migrating to Marseille. Now he leads a cooperative of 15 planting drought-resistant rice on the Central Plateau. President Traoré gave us tools, he said. But more than that, he gave us a reason to stay. But because for the first time they saw a future that included them. When the margins move, the center must rethink. The global react spoken at summits. They're woven and worn. What begins in cotton never stays in cotton history, is rarely rewritten in grand halls or headlines. More often, it begins quietly in cotton fields on dusty roads in the hands of ordinary people who decide that enough is enough. What happened in Burkina Faso was not just a trade agreement. It was a shift in posture from asking to asserting, from waiting to building, from being spoken for to speaking clearly. But let us be honest. This kind of shift is not welcomed by everyone. Already international pressure is mounting. Subtle diplomatic warnings, shifts in aid language, private sector hesitations. The idea that African nations can trade directly, build independently, and partner horizontally without asking permission is deeply unsettling to those who have long defined the rules. And so, the rebellion may face resistance. Not with guns, but with red tape. Not with war, but with discrediting delays and doubt. This is the warning. What began with cotton may soon expand to cocoa, gold, lithium, water, to the very resources the world depends on but rarely honors at their source. And if these patterns hold, new alliances will rise. Not of ideology, but of mutual respect, not based on debt, but on dignity. Because when a nation feeds itself, educates its youth, and paves its own roads, it becomes harder to manipulate and impossible to ignore. President Ibrahim Traoré didn't simply ink a deal. He set a precedent that trade is not trade unless it honors the humanity behind the harvest. And for those of us watching from Boston to Bamako, from Nairobi to New Orleans, the question is no longer, can Africa rise? The question is, will the world let go of its grip long enough to listen? If you believe that this story matters not just for Burkina Faso, but for what it says about justice, sovereignty, and what comes next, then help others hear it, share it, reflect on it, and let the world know that the thread has been cut and a new fabric is being sewn.